I never imagined that the night my aunt told me I didn't deserve the car I'd just fought so hard to get would become a turning point in my life. She said it like it was a verdict, cold and final. But what happened after that moment? It shook everything I thought I knew about family and myself. My name is Cassidy Monroe. For as long as I could remember, I had been hustling non-stop, juggling 2 jobs, working long into the night when most people were asleep, grinding so hard that sometimes I didn't even realize how exhausted I was until my body screamed at me to stop. There were countless mornings I dragged myself out of bed before dawn, nursing a cup of bitter coffee just to make it through another 12-hour shift. I never told anyone about those sacrifices, not because I wanted sympathy, but because it felt like something I had to do quietly, on my own, like a secret mission only I understood. I remember one winter night clearly, standing outside the old diner where I worked as a waitress. The biting cold was creeping under my coat, frosting my eyelashes, but I barely noticed because I was too caught up in my own thoughts, calculating the money I had saved, imagining the day I could finally buy my own car. The thought filled me with a fierce kind of hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about having a vehicle, it was about freedom, independence, the idea that I could finally go where I wanted, on my own terms, without relying on anyone else. After months of pinching pennies, skipping nights out, and turning down invitations from friends, I finally crossed that line. I saved enough. Enough to buy my very first car. It wasn't some fancy sports car or a flashy ride, it was a modest, slightly used sedan. But to me, it was a trophy, a symbol of every long hour, every missed moment, every struggle I'd endured on my own. When I signed the papers and got the keys, I felt this swell of pride that almost made me tear up right there in the dealership. But that pride didn't last long. Because the one person whose opinion mattered most, my aunt, the woman I had always looked up to, who'd raised me when my own parents weren't around, she looked at me with a cold, unreadable expression. Her words hit me like a punch, "You don't deserve that car." I stood frozen, the weight of her words sinking into my chest, crushing the excitement I had been holding on to. Suddenly, all those late nights, all those sacrifices, felt questioned, invalidated. The warmth I felt from finally achieving something on my own slipped away, replaced by confusion and hurt. How could she say that? Didn't she see how hard I worked? Why would she want to take this away from me? In that moment, the pride I thought I'd earned started to unravel, tangled up in doubt. Was I really not deserving? Or was this just another battle I wasn't prepared for? "You don't deserve that car." The words slipped from her lips slowly, deliberately, each syllable striking me like a precise, cold blade cutting through layers of my pride and accomplishment. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was a chilling finality in her voice, a low, measured tone that carried the weight of judgment, disappointment, and something far darker, contempt. I stood there, completely immobilized, feeling like time had stopped in that cramped, dimly lit living room where we faced each other. My heart pounded fiercely, pounding so loud I could almost hear it echoing in my ears like a relentless drum. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I was utterly speechless, unsure whether what I'd just heard was real or some cruel trick of my mind. Did she really think that? Did she honestly believe I hadn't earned this? Every single long, grueling shift at the diner where my feet were sore from standing all day. Every sleepless night when I'd come home exhausted, stomach growling but pockets empty. Every painstakingly saved dollar, counted and recounted, sacrificed so that I could finally have something that belonged to me, something that was mine alone. To hear all that effort dismissed so casually, reduced to an insult, as if it was nothing but an undeserved luxury, felt like a slap that echoed far beyond that moment. It wasn't just about a car anymore, it was about everything I'd poured my soul into. Her eyes didn't waver. Instead, they locked onto mine with a cold intensity that made me feel like she was drilling into my very core, searching for a crack, a weakness, anything she could use to prove me wrong. I felt exposed under her gaze, as if I was standing naked in a courtroom with her as the judge, jury, and executioner all at once. The silence between us was suffocating, stretching on and on like an invisible rope tightening around my chest. Around us, the familiar surroundings faded into the background, the faded floral wallpaper peeling slightly in one corner, the soft hum of the ancient ceiling fan stirring stale, warm air, and the faint, lingering aroma of burnt coffee that my aunt always brewed strong and black. All of it became insignificant compared to the storm raging just feet away. I could almost see the challenge in her eyes, daring me to falter, to shrink back into the small, uncertain girl she seemed to think I was. I could almost hear the unspoken expectation that I would lower my gaze, swallow my pride, and nod meekly in defeat. That I would admit I was less than what she believed I should be. But something inside me stirred, a slow-burning flame that grew with every heartbeat, every second that passed under her relentless scrutiny. Instead of crumbling, instead of letting her words wound me, a stubborn fire ignited deep within my chest. It was a fierce, raw defiance that I hadn't known I was capable of until that very second. How could she be so blind to the countless hours I'd worked, to the sacrifices I'd made? How could she try to tear down the very thing that symbolized my independence, my hard-earned success? My hands clenched into fists at my sides, trembling not from fear but from a surge of anger and hurt mingled with disbelief. The air between us thickened with the weight of unspoken grievances and years of unresolved tension, filling the space with an almost tangible bitterness. Her posture shifted, and she took a slow, deliberate step closer. Her disdain was palpable, dripping from every word she uttered like venom. You think having a car changes who you are? You think you're better than us now? Her voice dropped even lower, like a warning, or maybe a cruel accusation, each word carefully chosen to sting. The raw venom behind her question shocked me. It wasn't just about a vehicle anymore, it was about respect, about family, about some buried resentment and bitterness I hadn't fully realized existed until now. I blinked rapidly, struggling to process the flood of emotions crashing over me, confused by the harshness I'd never expected from her. Her eyes narrowed, searching mine, as if trying to uncover some hidden truth or weakness she could exploit. In that moment, the tension between us felt suffocating, thick enough to choke on, almost pressing the air out of my lungs. Then, in the heart of that charged silence, I made a choice. With deliberate calmness that surprised even me, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the car keys, the very keys she thought I didn't deserve. I held them out steadily, offering them to her like a peace treaty or a final challenge. My voice was quiet but steady, every word soaked in both exhaustion and unyielding resolve. Here. You want it? Her eyes widened slowly, almost painfully, as if the weight of what I had just done was sinking in much too fast, too heavy to bear. For a moment, I could see the confusion ripple across her face, mingled with a flicker of disbelief that seemed almost childlike, as if she were suddenly faced with a truth that didn't fit the narrative she had built so carefully for years. That disbelief wasn't just about the keys in her hand, it was about the shattering of expectations, hers, mine, and all the silent rules that had governed us for as long as I could remember. The air between us thickened, the silence growing so loud it almost filled the room, pressing against my ears like an invisible weight. The usual background noises, the soft creak of the old floorboards beneath my feet, the faint hum of the flickering ceiling fan, even the occasional distant bark of a dog from the street outside, seemed to fade into oblivion. The only thing that mattered was the suspended moment between us, stretched thin and trembling on the edge of something irreversible. Her hand hovered over the keys for what felt like an eternity, trembling ever so slightly, betraying the turmoil I could almost taste in the air. It wasn't the trembling of triumph or victory, the kind you'd expect from someone who had just won a fight. No, this was something far more complex, more vulnerable. It was confusion, uncertainty, and maybe even a faint, unspoken regret. Her fingers finally curled around the cold metal of the keys, the soft jingle sounding louder than it should, a fragile echo that seemed to reverberate inside my chest. At that moment, a powerful realization washed over me, she hadn't broken me. Despite every harsh word, every cutting glance, every cruel accusation, the chains she thought she held around me, the chains of approval, acceptance, and belonging, had begun to fall away. Instead, I was breaking free. breaking free from the weight of needing her approval to validate my worth. Breaking free from the suffocating role of the niece who was never good enough. Breaking free from the shadows that had kept me small and silent for far too long. I felt the invisible walls that had hemmed me in crumble piece by piece, like a fortress finally breached. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. A strange, heady mix of fear and liberation coursed through my veins, making my pulse race and my breath catch in my throat. I stood there, not as the timid girl I'd once been, but as someone reborn in the fire of confrontation and defiance. Her gaze lingered on me, locked and searching, like she was trying to decode the transformation she was witnessing, the woman who no longer needed to beg for acceptance, who no longer trembled under her harsh judgment. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, disbelief, yes, but also perhaps a faint trace of sorrow or regret. It was as if she suddenly realized that the person she thought she could control had grown beyond her reach, that the narrative she clung to was unraveling with every heartbeat. The room itself seemed charged with unspoken tension, thick with years of silence, pain, and unmet expectations. The faded wallpaper on the walls, the worn edges of the threadbare carpet, the little cracks in the paint, they all bore witness to the countless times I had tried to fit into a mold that wasn't made for me. But now, those worn surroundings felt less like a cage and more like the backdrop to my escape, a place I was leaving behind as I stepped into the light of my own making. Without uttering another word, I turned away from her, feeling the steady rhythm of my footsteps on the old hardwood floor beneath me. Each step was deliberate, measured, heavy with meaning. I wasn't just walking away from a bitter argument, I was walking away from a lifetime of being someone I wasn't allowed to be. I was walking away from the expectations, the judgments, and the narrow role she had assigned me, the niece who was always not enough. My head lifted high, my shoulders squared with newfound confidence and strength. I felt a quiet power settle over me, the kind of power that comes from reclaiming your own story, your own worth, on your own terms. The keys, once a symbol of my struggle and hard-won independence, now lay in her hands, a tangible reminder of the chains I had broken. Those keys no longer held any control over me. They were just metal and coldness, nothing more. As I reached the doorway, the soft creak of the hinges echoed behind me, marking the closing of a chapter one hadn't even realized I was ready to end. I didn't look back, even though I felt her eyes burning into my back. I knew that if I did, the fragile connection between us might pull me back into the past I was desperate to leave behind. Instead, I stepped forward, into the uncertain unknown beyond that door, carrying with me something I hadn't known I'd lost, freedom. The morning sun was still low, casting a soft golden glow over everything it touched. The light filtered through the thin curtains, pooling in warm puddles on the floorboards, making the dust motes dance lazily in the air. I lay there a moment longer, the quietness around me almost surreal compared to the storm that had raged inside my chest the day before. It felt like I was waking up in a different world, one where the weight pressing down on my shoulders had finally lifted. I breathed in deeply, filling my lungs with the cool morning air that carried faint hints of dew and earthiness from the rain that had soaked the night before. There was a clarity in that breath, a cleansing feeling, as if the tension and hurt from yesterday were slowly evaporating with each exhale. It was a subtle but profound change, one I wasn't quite sure I was ready to fully accept yet. Turning my head, I caught sight of the small silver keychain resting on the nightstand, the keys to my car. They glinted quietly in the sunlight, unassuming but powerful. The car itself was more than just metal and wheels. It was a symbol. A testament to years of sacrifice, grinding through exhaustion, pushing myself beyond limits I didn't know I had. Every long shift at the diner, every extra hour at the retail job, every meal skipped so I could save just a few more dollars had led me here. Those keys were proof that I had earned my independence, my freedom. But handing those keys over to my aunt yesterday wasn't an act of surrender. It was a statement, a declaration that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. That the power she thought she held over me was an illusion. That I was more than the niece she'd tried to define and diminish for so long. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up, feeling the familiar chill of the hardwood floor against my bare feet. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. The walls, yellowed and worn with age, seemed to hold their breath along with me. I padded over to the window and drew back the curtains, revealing the world outside waking up with a gentle sigh. The street was peaceful, lined with trees still dripping from the rain. Neighbors bustled about, some watering gardens, others loading cars for the day ahead. Somewhere down the block, a child's laughter rang out, a reminder that life moves forward, relentlessly and without pause. I watched a small bird hop along the pavement, pecking curiously at something shiny and forgotten, and felt a pang of kinship. Like me, it was moving on, seeking something new after the storm. As I stood there, memories flickered behind my eyes, the nights I stayed up counting change, the days I swallowed my pride just to keep going, the moments I doubted I'd ever make it this far. All of that seemed to converge in this one quiet morning, unfolding slowly, like pages turning in a book I was only just beginning to write. From downstairs, the muted sounds of the kitchen reached me, the clink of dishes, the scrape of a chair, the low murmur of voices. My aunt's voice, tentative and unfamiliar now, drifted upward. "Cassidy," she called softly, her tone lacking the usual edge. "Are you up?" I hesitated, heart fluttering with a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to retreat, to stay wrapped in the safety of my room, but something deeper told me this moment was important. I cleared my throat and answered, my voice steady but gentle. "Yeah. I'm up." Footsteps approached, tentative and slow. When she appeared at the doorway, her eyes met mine briefly, flickering with a complex mix of emotions I wasn't quite ready to name: regret, vulnerability, perhaps even a flicker of respect. I've been thinking about what happened," she said, voice soft, almost fragile. "Maybe I was too harsh. I didn't mean to make you feel small." I studied her face, the faint lines around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together like she was holding back words she didn't know how to say. For years, I'd wanted her approval, craved it even, but now I realized that my need for it had almost cost me my own voice. It hurt, I admitted quietly, but I needed to hear it. Because if I'm honest, I needed to know what I was up against. Sometimes, standing up means facing the people closest to you. She nodded slowly, a faint smile touching her lips, fragile but real. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for, Cassidy. Stronger than I ever imagined." That moment hung between us, a fragile truce, neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but the first step towards something neither of us could define yet. The house felt different somehow, less heavy, the air lighter, as if a burden had shifted just enough to let in a sliver of hope. As she left the room, I turned back toward the window, watching the world continue its dance of light and shadow. I thought about all the miles I'd yet to travel, both on the road and in life, and I felt ready. Ready to navigate whatever came next with my own hands on the wheel, steering toward the future I was choosing for myself. In that quiet dawn, I wasn't just the girl who had bought a car, I was the woman who had claimed her power, who refused to be diminished by the narrow gaze of someone who couldn't see her worth. And that truth, shining brighter than the morning sun, was mine to carry wherever I went. Since that night, the night I took a deep breath, held out the car keys, and walked away, my aunt hasn't mentioned the car. Or me. It's like I evaporated from her world, swallowed by a silence that stretched on longer than I expected. At first, that silence felt like a wound, raw and aching, as if my existence had been quietly dismissed. I caught myself waiting for her to say something, anything, a sign that I still mattered to her in some way. But the words never came. And honestly, the more days passed, the more I realized I didn't need her validation anymore. It's a strange, powerful feeling when you stop needing someone's approval, especially when that person shaped so much of how you saw yourself. I remember sitting alone one evening on the creaky front porch of our old house, the wooden steps worn smooth by years of footsteps. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the faint hint of rain from earlier in the day. Leaves rustled gently in the evening breeze, and the distant chatter of neighbors winding down their days floated softly to my ears. I pulled my knees to my chest, arms wrapped tight around them like a shield, staring out into the quiet street. The sky was painted with streaks of lavender and gold as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. It was one of those moments where time seemed to pause, and the weight of everything, past hurt, present struggle, future uncertainty, settled on my shoulders. And yet, in that stillness, something inside me shifted. I thought back to that confrontation, the heat of the argument, the sting of her words telling me I didn't deserve the car, the way her eyes pierced through me like I was invisible, less than worthy. I remembered the swell of anger and hurt that rose inside me, burning brighter than I thought possible. But more than that, I remembered the moment I chose to stand my ground. The moment I decided I wasn't going to shrink for anyone, even if it meant breaking her expectations. That night, handing over the keys wasn't about giving up a car, it was about reclaiming my power. Since then, I learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Walk away from the people who try to hold you back with their doubt and bitterness. Walk away from the voices that tell you you're not enough, that your dreams aren't valid, that your efforts don't matter. Because when you do, you don't just survive, you thrive. I thought about the car sitting quietly in the driveway, a modest silver sedan with its paint faded here and there, the dents on the bumper barely visible unless you looked closely. It smelled faintly of leather and the remnants of my favorite vanilla air freshener. Every scratch, every little imperfection told a story, not just of the car's life, but of mine. It was a vessel for my hard work, my sacrifices, my late nights and early mornings. It had carried me through doubts and dreams, through traffic jams and lonely drives. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore, it was a symbol of my independence. I remembered the day I bought it, how I sat in the dealership's waiting room, my heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it, counting down the minutes until it was finally mine. How I clutched the keys in my hand, feeling like I was holding the world. How proud I was to finally say, "This is mine. I earned it." One afternoon, my best friend Sarah called, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Cass, I saw your car outside. It's perfect, just like you. Solid, dependable, but with a little sparkle of something special." Her words made me smile, a warmth spreading through my chest. "Thanks, Sarah. It's more than just a car now," I told her. "It's proof. Proof that I'm enough exactly as I am." Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes, not just in how I saw myself, but in how the world responded to me. I held my head a little higher, smiled a little wider. I stopped shrinking in conversations, stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. The freedom I'd felt the moment I reclaimed those keys began to seep into every part of my life. The car was a daily reminder. I had taken control of my story, and I wasn't going back. Sometimes, I caught myself looking in the rearview mirror and feeling a flicker of gratitude for all the obstacles I'd overcome. For every time I'd doubted myself, every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. Because those moments had forged the woman I was becoming, resilient, fierce, unbreakable. At night, when the house was quiet and the world felt far away, I sometimes sat behind the wheel of that car, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing in the leather scent and the cool night air through the open windows. I'd close my eyes and imagine all the places I could go, roads that led to new beginnings, to adventures, to freedom. I felt like I was finally steering my own life, not just coasting along someone else's path. And through it all, I knew one thing for certain: I was enough. Not because someone told me so, not because I had a car or a title or a certain amount in my bank account. I was enough simply because I was me. Whole, imperfect, growing, and worthy of everything I dared to dream.